In the rules of engagement, some things are held sacred even in war. To not subject children to violence is one of them. But the stories now coming out of Israel have shattered any such illusion. Account after account of children being killed, kidnapped and tortured, with many still missing from their homes. Nearly 4 days after Hamas terrorists laid siege to the country, Israeli forces liberated the town of Kfar Aza near Gaza border. Even the soldiers, many of whom left their families behind in order to join the armed forces as reservists, were left shocked when they arrived on the site. Israeli media reports say that soldiers found entire families, men, women and children murdered. Many of them shot, even toddlers not spared. The reports of unprecedented brutality have sent waves of horror across the globe. In Nir Oz in the south of Israel, a family is pleading for the release of 10-year-old Erez Calderon. The boy was filmed being dragged by arms by Hamas terrorists with another one pointing a rifle. On Saturday morning, Erez was snatched from his family and dragged into Gaza across the border, even as he looked on silent and terrified. The atrocities in Israel have brought many world powers together to support Israel. Israel received its first shipment of US weapons yesterday night. Israeli Prime Minister has thanked the United States for its cooperation and support, saying that it was vital for regional security and stability. This is the third time that two world leaders engaged over a phone call after Hamas attack, wherein Benjamin Netanyahu once again condemned the surprise attack, calling Hamas worse than ISIS. But what's behind this entire escalation? To understand that better, we talk to experts on both sides of the border.
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 2 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Shocking pictures that have emerged from the Middle East, not just Israel, but Gaza as well. In fact, we could be staring at a potential huge humanitarian crisis there, but for the moment, it is fighting that has, in fact, erupted. What really can we expect in coming days, and what's happening on ground as both sides are engaged in an information warfare as well? In fact, putting out a lot of information to support the arguments that each side has made. And let's talk about that. We have with us Commander Frederick Landau, Israel intelligence, joining us. With us also is Daud Kutab, who's a Palestinian journalist. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on Times Now. Let me begin you first, Commander Landau. First and foremost, can you tell us about the latest situation on ground in terms of where the fighting is and where the airstrikes are? How much longer is the expectation from the Israel side that this kind of fighting will continue on ground?
Good evening, sir, and thank you for having me on your show. The current situation on the ground is that Israel is in mourning. Israel is still counting over 1,000 bodies, children, women, men, civilians. Israel is still counting the bodies. We are talking about bodies that are very difficult to identify due to the massacre, the brutal massacre that was done by the Hamas terrorists. In regards to the military operation now, Israel has managed to put back against the terrorists who infiltrated into our lands, and we are currently closing off the border, and our Air Force is now starting to strike against enemy targets. I repeat, enemy targets, not civilian targets. And we will see in the next coming days the full force of the Israeli Defense Forces from air, land, and sea.
Right. Daud Kutab is shaking his head. Daud Kutab, assertion coming in from Israeli side that it is only targeting enemy targets, which we can really read as Hamas. Is that the perception that you share as well?
Well, I'm sure they're trying to get the Hamas targets, but they're mostly underground. They are bringing down entire buildings that have no military value, except that it's a revenge. The Israelis are angry, and one can understand their anger and their frustration and their mourning. It's a shame and it's terrible what happened, and we all mourn with each other because so 1,000 Palestinians have been killed since then as well, including children, including women, including families. So we're in a bear hug of killing each other, and we need to stop this. Both sides, we need to have a political solution. But we are in a bad situation. Hamas, I'm not in support of Hamas at all. I don't believe in violence, but I I can tell you that many people understand that the frustration by blocking the political process has produced this explosion that we've seen. And again, I think one has to agree that there has to be a ceasefire, and that there are a lot of civilians who are being, even the Israeli defense minister said, we're going to cut off water, electricity, and fuel from all Gaza. He didn't say from Hamas, he said from all Gaza. That's a war crime.
Okay, that's a war crime, Frederick Landau, if it does happen in terms of cutting off or sealing off the entire Gaza Strip. That's a first question coming from Daud Kutab, but he says at the moment there's a huge amount of collateral damage. It isn't just Hamas which is losing lives, it is common citizens. And just as in the case of the ghastly and many would say unforgivable, shocking attack on part of Hamas on Israeli soil, he says that there are women and children on the Gaza side who are also losing their lives.
Let me talk to you about war crimes, gentlemen. War crimes that started on Saturday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning when women, children, and men were in their beds on the morning of the Sabbath. They were bombarded by 5,000 rockets. The militants, the terrorists who barged into their homes, burning them in their beds, they were targeted as targets, not because of where they lived, but because of who they were. I am the grandson of a Holocaust survivor. I heard his stories all my life of the massacres, the pogroms, just because we were Jewish. Since 1945, the Jewish people have not suffered such a big massacre. I repeat, since 1945, which was the end of the Holocaust, the Jewish people has not suffered such a massacre. So please don't talk to me about war crimes, alleged war crimes, that the Israeli military is now starting. We are targeting only Hamas targets. We are warning citizens ahead of time where we will strike and where the strike will come from. Just this afternoon, we told them which neighborhoods to vacate in order not to harm the civilians. And I must tell you that before I came on this show, there were sirens again above my head. I had to make sure that my wife and my children were in the safe room, and I continue talking to you without knowing what the current situation is. I repeat, my wife and my children are in the safe room. There are sirens in Tel Aviv as we speak, and I do not know their situation. We did not get a warning that they are going to strike against Tel Aviv. We are warning the Gaza citizens, get out of the war zone.
But, you know, Commander Landau, if I can ask you a question before I go across to Daud Kutab, you know, there are many who are raising questions about the intelligence failure aspect of it. Not just collecting so many rockets and hardware, but, you know, over 1,000, 1,500, whatever it is, the total number of Hamas terrorists, militants, whatever one chooses to call them, who are amassed at the border. And also there is footage coming in of, you know, aerial footage which shows how the UAVs were perhaps used to penetrate the border fence, which many thought was impenetrable. Do you think that's an over-reliance on remote, you know, footage, cameras, so on and so forth, that led to this kind of a pass?
Well, I must say that here in Israel, we know that we are going to have to interrogate ourselves. We know that we are going to have to make a large check and a large report of what happened on the morning of Saturday. But it's not time for that. We know that we got a big shock. We were surprised on our holiday, on our holy day of the Sabbath. This is not the first time. It happened to us in 1973, and exactly 50 years later, it is happening again. In 1973, our Chief of Armed Forces, 2 days after the attack started, warned that we were going to break the bones of the enemy. We are going to do the same 50 years later.
No, but, you know, let me take this question across to Daud Kutab. Daud Kutab, you heard what the panelist is saying, how he fears for his own family's safety, even as he's speaking to us. And at the same time, I want to take you through a comment that you have made. because you've said on the platform X, formerly known as Twitter, that in a few days, Israelis went through what Palestinians have experienced in a matter of routine for decades, amongst other things, a position of inferiority. Somewhere or the other, this appears to be a justification of the ghastly attack by the Hamas. Daud Kitab.
Yeah, this was not my quote. It was Amira Hess, an Israeli, also a Holocaust survivor. So yes, it was a quote from Amira Hess in Haaretz. My daughter is pregnant, 8 months pregnant. She lives in Jerusalem, in a neighborhood, a Palestinian neighborhood. She's not able to go to the hospital in Hadassah to give birth. The road is closed. So yes, we can all talk about the suffering.
I'm sorry, sir.
Everyone is suffering. Everyone is.
My sister is 8 months pregnant too.
I didn't cut you off. I didn't cut you off. You want to cut me off? I didn't listen.
Gentlemen, one at a time. One at a time. I'm coming to you. I'm coming to you. Commander Landau, let him complete his point. He's talking about his daughter. Make your point quickly, please. Daud Kitab.
I'm just saying that we can all explain our family issues. Every one of us has family. Every one of us has suffering. Our peoples have suffered. Your people have suffered. We need to break this violence. The cycle of violence has to be broken.
But it's an escalation. Daud Kitab, Daud Kitab, end of the day, it is an escalation from Hamas's side. Leave aside the family. The humanitarian suffering of innocent people, of innocent civilians, is the point that has the entire world shocked. Today, if you have the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, France, all supporting Israel, even India has. The point is that all these countries, in some level or the other, have been victims of terror. And that causes a huge amount of public outrage.
I'm not justifying terror. I didn't say that. I said we're all mourning. We all have family. All of us have lost people. So the question is, what do we do? 75 years, Palestinians became refugees. They're not allowed to return. 56 years ago, we were occupied. 16 years ago, Gaza was under siege. So we're talking about a long conflict. 3 days before this event, Israeli Jews violating Israeli agreements with Jordan and started praying in Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest mosque in all of Islam. There is lots of problems. There's a lot of context. Yes, there is suffering, absolutely. And the suffering of the Israelis and the Palestinians are unsurmountable. They're terrible. We should denounce every attack. I've never heard Israeli denounce war crimes against Palestinians. I heard justification.
And, Commander Landau, you can respond to the point being made that everybody has personal problems. But the larger question that many are also looking at is that what would possibly happen in Lebanon, for instance, pictures of people being evacuated. Are we looking at the possibility of this fighting spreading to other parts, or is it going to be restricted to Israel and Gaza?
If you don't mind, I'm going to quote President Biden, who, by the way, I would like to thank him for his powerful speech yesterday. President Biden, while talking about this option of Iran using proxies to also start the conflict in the north, he used one strong word: don't. And we in Israel are ready, and our forces are on the border. But I'm going to repeat what President Biden said: don't. It's not worth trying us.
Right. That's the word coming in from President Biden. A very strong word over there coming in, Daud Kitab. And that just goes to underline that at least as far as the international community is concerned, yes, there may be a few countries in the Middle East who have come out in support of the position vis-a-vis Palestinians. But at least the overwhelming majority of the global opinion is at the moment in favor of Israel. Would you say that, Daud Kitab?
Well, I would say not the whole world, but there's, yes, countries are against what happened. I'm against what happened. It's not, we're not defending what happened or explaining it. I'm trying to say, I'm a journalist. I try to look at things in a neutral way. And there has been trouble for many, many, many years, decades. We need to stop. Everybody, all sides have to stop. And we have to take seriously. When the Egyptians told the Israelis, be careful, stop doing what you're doing in Al-Aqsa Mosque, take care, there's warning, warning, warning. Nobody was listening. When the Palestinians said, you cannot have a siege for 16 years in Gaza, when King Abdullah said 5 million people under occupation, it cannot go on for long, everything was ignored. And yes, there was an explosion. but we have to look at the context also.
But you know, there are reports coming in, Daud Kutab, of babies, children not being...
If I can just pick up on those two...
Okay, your response, yeah. Go ahead.
Yes. Again, there is not a siege on Gaza. Gaza has a border with Egypt, which is open. Israel has a border with Gaza, which we also open. Just last week, we had 18,000 workers from Gaza come into Israel to work. The Egyptian border is open. If they are not happy in Gaza, they can go to Egypt. And again, a second false comment, Al-Aqsa Mosque is open to all religions. Why shouldn't there be a freedom of worship for all religions? The same way that Muslims can come to the Western Wall, Jews, Christians, and Muslims should go to Al-Aqsa. Stop trying to justify the barbarity, the Nazi-style pogrom that happened on Saturday morning to the peaceful visit of Jewish people who want to pray on the Holy of Holies.
Okay. There's also a charge, Commander Landau, coming in from the Palestinian side that Israeli forces are putting out false news. For instance, of 40 babies being beheaded. That's a news report that has been put out by forces that has been retweeted. Perhaps it was carried rightly or wrongly by certain agencies. But the charge is that misinformation is being weaponized by Israel. Is that a correct position?
Misinformation is everywhere. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and the government of Israel is under no circumstances behind these fake news. It's true, there are many atrocities that have come out, but sadly, many of them are true. On the phone call last night between President Biden and our Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, they spoke of the stories that they saw with their own eyes. And these are burnt babies, raped and murdered women, and captive men. This is not fake news. Hamas is ISIS. They are using the same tactics, the same techniques. Even if some of it may not be fake news, one burnt baby, one raped mother, one captive father is more than enough.
Absolutely. And Daud Kutab, there's no justifying some of these crimes. They're extremely barbaric. There's not human, and perhaps no one who commits these crimes can, call themselves a human being, because, in the name of a struggle or a revolution, going out and doing these ghastly acts is completely unacceptable. And even though there is perhaps some misinformation happening, and that should not happen, no journalist perhaps can support that kind of wrong reportage. But the point that is being made over here is, look at the gravity of the barbaric crimes that have already happened, which is why, when we talk about the number of reports of elderly senior citizens killed, children killed, rapes that have happened, brutalities on women, that, people actually believe these things because many of these have actually already happened and been reported extensively. Daud Kutab.
What's the question?
No, the question I'm making is what he is saying
I didn't
is
justify it.
Yeah.
You're accusing me of something I didn't do.
No, I'm not accusing you. I'm not accusing you. I'm not accusing you.
I tried to explain to you and to your guests what happened, the context of what happened. You cannot take words out of my mouth and make claims I didn't say. I didn't justify. I said that what happened is building up. It was warned by everyone, and it has to end by a political solution. Religious people are on all sides, Christians, Muslims, Jews, have one belief. Nobody can argue with the religious people because they are stubborn. They believe in God the way they believe in God. We should take out the religious people and find a political solution. Muslims, Jewish, Christian, fundamentalists cannot be negotiated with. They have a very strong opinion. What I'm saying is we need to recognize a Palestinian state alongside Israel, and we need our leaders to find solutions between them. That's what we need.
Right. But the point that is being made by many is that can that peace actually be achieved when you have, foreign countries? Israel repeatedly talks about the role that Iran, for instance, has had in terms of aiding Hamas and Hezbollah. So unless, that stops, can we really achieve a lasting peace? Because you may want to differentiate between the Hamas and the Palestinian Authority at the end of the day, but if the funding, the arming and support continues, then certainly the violence is going to continue. Daud Kutab.
I don't, with all due respect, there is very, very little proof that Iran was behind this. This was an act.
Maybe not behind this, but in generic terms is what I'm speaking.
Look, Hezbollah is Shiite, Iran is Shiite. Yes, they are cooperating. Hamas is Sunni. They're not from the same religious denomination. We don't have proof. Nobody has proved. Nobody has presented proof that this was coordinated, ordered by Iran. Okay, Iran may be supporting, like everybody else is supporting the Palestinians, but this is not, and we should not make it into a regional conflict. The regional conflict should not be involved, and Hamas and Hezbollah should not be involved. I agree. This is a Palestinian-Israeli conflict that must be resolved by Israelis and Palestinians with the help of the international community.
Commander Landau, how do you respond to that? There's no proof of Iran having supported Hamas either in this episode or otherwise. How do you respond to that?
10 days before this barbaric attack happened, there was a meeting in Tehran, the capital of Iran, between Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Quds forces of Iran. For the past years, Iran have been funding both organizations and others to attack Jewish people in Israel and outside Israel. Iran is training Hezbollah. Iran is handing them with sophisticated equipment, including long-range missiles. Iran is behind the conflict. And the fact is that Israel, the United States, and Saudi Arabia were on the verge of making historic peace. MBS bravely said that this peace agreement was going to change the Middle East. And the reason that it would change the Middle East is because Iran and their proxies would have become isolated, weak, and without any friends left in the region. This is the reason that this is happening. Iran is scared. Iran is seeing Israel getting stronger, gaining friends in Abu Dhabi, in Manama, in Cairo, all over the world, including, sir, in your country, India. I know first-handedly the intimate relationship between India and Israel on all levels, and we thank Prime Minister Modi for that. That is what Iran is trying to stop.
Right. Daud Kutab, do you agree with that? Because Israel has tried to reach out to UAE, it has tried to reach out to Saudi Arabia, and in fact the reaction that we are seeing in the Middle East perhaps is very different today had this incident happened about 15, 20 years ago.
Look, the possibilities of attempting to connect everything together, everybody has their own analysis. This is analysis, and I could give you a counter-analysis. For example, MBS, the Saudi Crown Prince, was telling the Israelis, no normalization unless you deal with the Palestinian issue, a substantial solution to the Palestinians. That was the Saudi. Now, whether this is aimed to scuttle the Saudi normalization, it might be there. I don't know, but I don't think that's what we need to worry about. I think what everybody knows, I will repeat it for the 10th time, political negotiations have been closed the last 10 years. BDS and democratic nonviolent boycotts have been closed. ICS, the International Criminal Court, and war crimes have been closed. Palestinians are under siege, under occupation, and there was an explosion. We need to find the root of the problem and solve it, and not just talk about the peripheral results of the problem. We have to go to the root.
We have to go to the root, he says, and we'll have to leave it there for the moment. Commander Frederick Landau, as well as Daud Kutab, I'd like to thank both of you gentlemen for joining us this evening. Certainly, of course, there are no easy answers in this kind of a conflict happening at such a huge scale, but we certainly hope for an early resolution as far as possible, as far as the fighting on ground is concerned. And certainly, of course, the heart-rending scenes that we've seen of what the citizens have had to go through, that's something that we certainly hope the suffering does not continue in the manner in which it is. I'd like to leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The News Hour.